protecting the environment, what advice do you think she would give institutions such as the Academy of Natural Sciences who like to make science accessible and fun for all people? How should we educate people about current environmental issues?
That's the best way that I can answer that question is to first of all observe that you're already doing it beautifully. This is such a great space to be in today and to be talking about Rachel Carson, because all of these wonderful materials that people can look at and handle and explore are exactly the kinds of things that she would tell you to do. So I think if Rachel Carson were here today, she would be saying to the Academy, keep up the good work. I also want to say that her book, The Sense of Wonder, is a book about exploring nature, children and adults together. And that's something else that she felt was important, that children and adults together could explore the natural world, and that adults could help children with the benefit of their experience and their knowledge, but that the adults needed the children to keep alive their own imagination and their own sense of wonder and awe at the natural world. So read this book again. I'm sure you've read it at least once, because it's filled with ideas for exploring nature in a creative and imaginative way.
Well, thank you, Jackie. And we have been learning so much, not only from Vivian, but from some wonderful questions that the members of our audience have asked. We've got some more to talk about, so let's throw it back to Vivian now for more. Vivian?
There was once a town in the heart of America where all life seemed to live in harmony with its surroundings. The town lay in the midst of a checkerboard of prosperous farms, with fields of grain and hillsides of orchards where, in spring, white clouds of bloom drifted above the green fields. In autumn, oak and maple and birch set up a blaze of color that flamed and flickered across a backdrop of pines. Then foxes barked in the hills and deer silently crossed the fields, half hidden in the mists of the fall mornings. A lot of people have devoted a lot of study to the question of how it was that this book could have been so effective in changing the world. It was published in 52 languages. It's read around the world. If you were a Japanese high school student, you wouldn't be allowed to graduate until you read the first chapter of this book in English. What was it about this book that made it so effective? In part, it was the fact that Rachel Carson was both a scientist and a writer. Her scientific facts are based on the most extensive research, not just her own research. In the back of this book, there are 52 pages of footnotes referencing the highest quality, most exacting work by the finest scientists of the day. But it was her use of language that made people who were not scientists able to understand so clearly the important message that she was delivering. And we're going to look now at just two of the things that she did that made her writing so effective. We're going to look at how she helps us to understand by talking about things as if they were something else and giving us a different way to think about it. And we're also going to look at how she lets us see the world from different points of view. The first is talking about things as if they were something else. In that opening chapter, that opening paragraph of the first chapter of the book, Did you hear what she said about the trees in the fall? She spoke about them as if they were fire. She spoke about, you heard that? She said that they blaze and flicker. And you can see that image of the beauty of those trees because of the use of the language. Here's another example. A scholar from New York looked at Rachel Carson's field notebooks. She wanted to find out how she changed her field notes into such poetic writing. You know what she found out? The poetic writing is in the field notes. She didn't go back and turn it into poetry after she wrote it down. That was how she thought about the natural world. So here's an excerpt from one of her field notebooks, something she scribbled her notes in as she was out observing some birds along the sea. Saw tracks of a shorebird, probably a sanderling, and followed them a little. Then they turned toward the water and were soon obliterated by the sea. How much it washes away and makes as though it never had been. Time itself is like the sea, containing all that came before us, sooner or later sweeping us away on its flood and washing over and obliterating the traces of our presence as the sea this morning erased the footprints of the bird. The blaze of color in fall trees. Time is like the sea. She invites us to use our imagination. She invites us to pretend. She wrote a television script about clouds, and this is from that script. She says, "We are going to pretend we live on the bottom of an ocean of air in which clouds are adrift, just as sponges and coral and spidery crabs inhabit the floor of the water ocean. But it will not be hard to pretend that, for in fact, that is just what we do. In relation to the air ocean, we are exactly like deep sea fishes with all the weight of tons of air pressing down upon our bodies." So are you ready to pretend? Yeah? We're going to play a pretending game. You're seated with other groups of people, and I would like to say that to the extent that I get to make up rules, I'm making up a rule that grown-ups get to play too. Fun is not just for kids. That's important to know. You should have a little treasure chest or a little bundle of treasures. And you should also have a packet with some cards and some pencils. Do this together as a group. You can pass around the cards and then look at the card that has a list on it. You can all work together to do this, or you can pass them around, and one person writes down a place. The place might be a mountaintop in Pennsylvania, a town in the heart of America, out along the seashore, by the river, on a city street, in your backyard, whatever place you want. And then a time. The time could be once upon a time, or it could be on a Saturday morning, or it could be in the future, any time you like. Then you're going to write down the scale, the size of things. You're not going to say, I'm 6 inches tall, but you might say, I looked up at the towering daffodil, and that let us know how tiny you are. What kind of motion were you in when you discovered your treasure? Were you hopping? Were you soaring through the air? Were you swimming through the water? Were you slithering through the grass? How were you moving? And what sense did you use when you noticed that there was a treasure? Did you smell something? Did you hear something? Did a flash of light or a brilliant color happen to catch your eye? What sense did you use? And then describe your treasure. You can choose one treasure from your little package. You can use all of the treasures. It's up to you. And then you have a turning point. When did you realize that this was a treasure? What helped you to understand? And what connection did you make to something else? Something else in your treasure chest, something else outside, something in your imagination. And finally, you can tell us that your treasure lived happily ever after, or that every time you remember the day that you found it, you feel in a certain way, but bring your story to an end. It might come out as a story, or it might come out as a poem. You'll write each one of these things on a separate card, because then you can shuffle them around. And when you're done, we're going to ask anyone who wants to come forward and share your stories with the rest of us.
Well, our audience has been hard at work composing their stories, so what do you say we hear from a few of them? We've got a young lady right here who's got a story to read us. Go ahead.
In my garden, early in the morning, a leaf just in the corner, little as can be, swaying gently. I smelled a beautiful smell attacking me, wilting a bit, an herb. I picked it and kept it forever.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was a great story. And it looks like we've got another story right here.
Well, I was at the Great Lakes. I found a small wavy shell, and I put it to my ear. It sounded like the lake, and the wavy sounds and the water hitting that sand. And I heard the connection with the ruler, and I wondered what animal died in the shell.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And it looks like we've got someone over here who's got something to share as well, because it looked like you guys were working really hard. What do you have? Daddy, would you read it?
We crossed the bridge late at
Night, we
were running and tripped. It felt
spiky,
but
kind,
we were creatures as
small,
as the sea.
star.
It was strange
to us.
It lifted us
In its
many
many arms
and
and hugged us. The
stars
stars
of the sky and sea were joined.
we were happy.
That's it.
Very good. Thank you both for sharing that with us. Do we have somebody else who'd like to share what they came up
There's a
with,
group
their
up here that
composition,
really wants to
their
share,
story?
Tracy.
Okay. So let's see what we've got over here. Gentlemen? All right, tell us what you've got.
Beans of a oak tree, starting out so small and smooth, taking so long to grow. With even in the most plentiful of forests, towering over everything, growing to over 10 feet tall.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for sharing.